how much the documents change from the current state, but we can certainly take whatever changes are made and reflect those and put them together. I guess I was thinking that it would just be one seamless document.
Well, yeah, and I just, because we've got the recommendations, I have 2 committee reports. Did we ever get one from the 3rd committee?
No, I don't believe so. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we got anything from Whitney.
That's correct. Good morning, Justice Hudson. And just to let everyone know, we have started live streaming. No, we have not received anything from Administration and Justice Committee yet.
Okay, well, we can see how the discussion goes once we get to the end of the committee reports and recommendations. Take it from there.
That sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Good morning, Judge Rader. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm just getting a little feedback from your microphone. Is it okay if I mute you for now?
Yeah, I'll mute it as well.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sean. I was going to ask you if you knew where that was coming from. But that helped a lot. Thank you, Judge. But I think we probably should go ahead and get started. Excuse me?
As well, I just joined home.
I'm sorry, your sound is breaking up.
This is Laura Giselle. I joined by phone.
Excellent.
And this is Nana Sante. I'm also present by phone.
I think about time for us to get started. And so just for, I think it's easier for everyone to hear if people are muting.
Oh, yeah.
Keep your audio muted if you're not speaking. So with that having been said, welcome everyone. Thank you for being with us for the meeting of the North Carolina State Judicial Council. I'm Justice Robin Hudson, acting as the chair. I would like to thank and recognize, if any of these people are here, Chief Justice Beasley, Director McKinley Wooten, Director of AOC, Anna Stearns, General Counsel and Chief of Staff to the Chief Justice. Hi, Anna. Nice to see you. And thank you to Sean Callan, who is acting as our host, and Kurt Stevenson, and our staff, Emily Mehta at AOC, for all of the good work that you've done once again in preparation for this meeting. Thank you all for being here and for continuing to do this work under what I know are continuing challenges and unprecedented circumstances that we're all dealing with in the courthouses. And now that school is about to start or not or something, it presents a whole array of challenges. And thank you all so much for continuing with your commitment and dedication to this work. A few housekeeping details to remind you of. In accordance with the remote public meetings law, the video and audio are being live streamed to the public on the NC Court's website, and a recording will be made. There's a few additional requirements that I just wanted to, again, bring to your attention. Any member of the council who's participating and who is not on video, that is only by their call-in information, must identify yourself prior to doing any of the following things. When a roll is taken or the meeting is commenced, prior to participating in deliberations or making motions, proposing amendments, or raising points of order, and third, prior to voting. So remember to identify yourself, those who are on audio only. All votes must be done by roll call, and all chats between members and staff are considered public record. So with that little reminder, Sean Callan is going to handle the roll call. Sean, are you ready to do that?
Certainly.
Thank you.
District Attorney Asbell.
Present.
Ms. Harjo.
Present.
Judge Sermons.
I am here.
Judge Rader.
I'm present. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Castello.
Present.
Mr. Hale.
John Hale, present.
Mr. Phillips. Okay. Mr. Mazingo.
Present.
Mr. Campbell.
Present. Happy to be here.
Very good. Glad to have you. Mr. Burns.
Present.
Ms. Fairbanks. All right, we'll circle back to Ms. Fairbanks. Clerk Johnson.
Here.
Chief Judge McGee.
Good morning. I'm present.
Good morning. Ms. Asante Smith. I thought she was here. Ms. Asante Smith.
I thought she was too.
I'll come back to her. Ms. Cole just emailed me saying she had a conflict come up just this morning, so she won't be able to make it. No, I'm sorry. That's Miss Henderson. Miss Cole, are you here?
No, I'm here. Rebecca Henderson is here.
Oh, Rebecca Henderson is here. Then it is
I'm
Miss
here.
Cole.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, everyone. Sheriff Miller.
Present.
Very good. And Ms. Asante Smith? Justice Hudson, did she not speak this morning?
Hey, Kurt, this is Emily. I believe she's calling user 5. I don't think she can unmute herself on the phone, though, so you might need to unmute her.
Very good. My apologies, Ms. Asante Smith. I've unmuted you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, okay,
Excellent.
great. I was like, I can hear you. Okay, yes, I'm present. Thank you, John.
Okay, very good.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Emily. All right, no problem.
Thanks, Emily.
Justice Hudson, that concludes the roll call.
Thank you. And thank you, Sean, and thank you everyone for being here. Again, I really appreciate your time and commitment to this work. The next item on the agenda is the minutes from the last meeting. I'm sure that you all have received them. They were circulated by email. And I hope that you've had an opportunity to look over them. At this point, we'll take a few minutes so you can go back over them on the screen. And I would entertain a motion and second for approval whenever you all are ready.
Well, this is Jennifer Harjo, and I have reviewed them, and I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
And this is Linda McGee. I second that motion.
Thank you both. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Judicial Council from May 15th. And again, the vote will be taken by roll call. So Sean, if you are ready to do the roll call, can we do it by voice vote first and then you do the roll call, or just by roll call?
Just by roll call, yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's go ahead once again, and thank you, Sean, for handling that part.
No problem at all. District Attorney Asbell.
Yes. I mean, are we voting for the minutes?
We're voting. Yes, we're voting on whether to approve the minutes. So if you're in favor of approving, you can vote yes.
Yes.
Ms. Harjo?
Yes.
Judge Sermons?
Yes.
Judge Rader?
Yes.
Mr. Castlew?
Yes.
Mr. Hale?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips is not here. Mr. Mazingo?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Fairbanks? Not here yet. Is she here yet? No? Okay. Clerk Johnson?
Yes.
Chief Judge McGee?
Yes.
Ms. Asante Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Cole is not here. Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
And Sheriff Miller?
Yes.
Very good. The ayes have it, I believe, Justice Hudson.
Thanks, Sean. I didn't hear any opposed, so that appears to be unanimous. But thank you for recording the roll call vote. And thank you all for reviewing those. As you recall, at the last meeting, we looked at the recommendations from a number of constituent groups involved with the Judicial Council of their short-term and long-term needs. And some of those recommendations have been incorporated into the discussions and reports from the committees that have reported. I apologize if you hear my security detail barking in the background, but I can't really mute myself while doing this. But what we're going to do today is some of that information has been incorporated into the committee recommendation and reports. What we'd like to do is to hopefully finalize the recommendations in preparation for finalizing a report and forwarding it to Chief Justice Beasley. As you remember, the judicial branch budget process for the long session typically begins really soon. So this work is really timely, and I really appreciate everybody staying on schedule and continuing with your meetings and reports. Under these unprecedented times, it's limited the ability to meet and formulate recommendations in person. But we would like to hear briefly from the committee chairs about the reports, perhaps to summarize. And after these updates are complete, then we can have some time to discuss the information and whether we want to redirect the priorities or group the recommendations in a different way. But I would like to invite the co-chairs of the Budget and Performance Committee, first Chief Judge Linda McGee and Chief District Court Judge Rader, to be the first committee update and recommendation. Can we start with you, Chief Judge McGee?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
The Budget and Performance Measures Committee had the opportunity to meet this summer, and we spent a good deal of talking about the proposals from the various constituencies that within the Judicial Division, and we have put together this list that I believe you see on your screen of some priorities that we thought were particularly important. We had the opportunity later in the summer to amend those if we felt that was necessary, but did not occur. And so we have some suggestions that are basically divided into what we listed as immediate needs, short-term needs, and then long-term needs. The dollar figures for any of these, of course, are not included here, but we did benefit from all the reports that have already been provided to the council. And of course, on many of those braces, the judicial branch, the 2020-2021 budget certainly has dollar figures, but we felt the better thing to do was to have a priority listing, and then it could be expanded when needed to be able to make a specific presentation to the General Assembly. Judge Rader, anything you want to add to the general comments?
I guess the only thing I would add is that when we reviewed the request or the prioritization reports that we received from each of the constituent groups, they were all very valid and I think legitimate requests and needs that these different constituent groups have. I think you could make a list of every one of them that's in the individual reports, and it would be very needed and legitimate requests. But I think Judge McGee is right. Our focus was to try to prioritize those. And we did so with immediate short-term and long-term needs. So you will see, if you look very closely at the individual requests that were submitted compared to the list we came up with, there are some items that some groups submitted that are not included. But I think that's because of the prioritization and the current climate and the need to meet what we saw as the highest needs of the courts at the moment. So I think we did a pretty good job prioritizing.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing this. It looks like you all have sort of drilled in and focused on prioritizing it very carefully. And there does seem to be a theme in all of these, that the priorities seem to be one and two in that order, usually technology and personnel.
Yeah.
And the question is just going to be, how fully can those needs be funded under the current circumstances? But I really appreciate your compiling this so concisely, especially. Does anybody have any questions for Judge Rader or Chief Judge McGee? After we do the other reports, then we'll have sort of more open discussion about whether to approve these or put them together or alter them somehow. But for right now, if you have any specific questions or comments for the committee chairs, this would be a good time.
If I may, this is Jennifer Harjo. I was on the budget committee. I'm on the budget committee. And I just wanted, for the benefit of the group, to let everybody know that as a representative of the Public Defender Association, the requests that we might have are not necessarily included here because our budget is different, because we are in a separate budget. So while we have needs as well, and I would, at some point in time, hope that this committee would be supportive of those needs. Our specific requests and needs are not included because we're just in a different budget. And so I just wanted to make that clear.
I have a question about that. Whoever can answer it. Regardless of what pot of money it comes from, aren't we tasked with listing our priorities in the whole system? And shouldn't it be in there regardless of what pot of money it comes from? Because there are needs for more public defenders.
Judge McGee?
Actually, I was going to call on Jennifer to share her thoughts.
Yeah, well, I will. And so that was one of the issues, I guess, that arose at one of our last in-person committee member meetings. We spoke about that and about whether or not to include those needs or how we were going to address our budget that was separate from everybody else's budget. The intent was to invite, at the time, the director, Tom Maher, to the meeting, and we were going to discuss that and have more conversation about the separate budget issues. COVID came, we had a change in directors, and I believe that so we have a new director as of just days ago, Mary Pollard. So I think that might have gotten a little, set aside because of those issues, just because of the timing of those issues. We did discuss it during, as I said, during our last in-person meeting, but I don't know that we ever necessarily got together and addressed it because we did not have our director come to discuss with us, with the group yet. The differences in the budget and the budget requests and that sort of thing. So I think that's how that got set aside. And quite honestly, during the other meetings, I really wasn't prepared to talk about it yet either. So our needs, as I said, are just not on the list. Just because of a separate budget issue.
Well, it does seem to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Judge McGee or Judge Rader. It seems to me that the needs of the public defender, their offices around the state, whether it comes from Director Pollard or from Jennifer, should be included, whether it comes out of the same pot of money or not. Because my understanding of our task is that it's supposed to be focusing on the broad needs of the system, and certainly the public defenders are a really important part of the system, and it seems like that should be included. Judge McGee, do you agree with that? What do you think?
Right. I'm sure none of the committee members would be averse to the idea of making certain that we have their goals for the public defenders well listed too. Jennifer, if you could perhaps work with me and Judge Rader to be in touch with Mary Pollard to get some specific information, and pretty much like we had received from virtually everyone else, and perhaps have her have a little opportunity to have her input too, then we can add that information, I think, fairly rapidly.
I think so, and I'd be happy to do that.
This is Whitney Fairbanks. Can I be heard?
Yeah, Whitney, sure. I saw that you wanted to chime in. Please.
I apologize. I'm struggling with a brand new computer from AOC, and I'm never quite sure whether my video is on or my audio is on. And I apologize for that. So this is Whitney Fairbanks. I'm the Deputy Director at Indigent Defense Services, and its commission's appointee to this council. And as Jennifer noted, we had to respond to a public health emergency while we were searching for a new executive director. And I was actually the person who continued to work as both the deputy director and the executive director for the last 5.5 months. And And as a result of that, have been somewhat delinquent in my responsibilities outside of IDS, including to this council. So I'll just take this moment to make that apology. But I will also say that that is part of the reason why IDS may not have been as responsive if there were requests from the budget committee. I know that Mary Pollard would certainly welcome discussing with this council and with the committee what not just the public defender's funding needs are, but what the North Carolina Public Defense System's funding needs are, including increased appropriations for private assigned counsel who do about 53% of the public defense work in North Carolina. It is a underfunded system from Murphy to Manteo, as we like to say. Judge Sermons is eager to get a standalone public defender office in his district. Jennifer's office needs to expand into Pender County, and private assigned counsel needs an increase in hourly wages. And in as much as the Judicial Council is commenting on or providing advice and guidance on what improves the judicial system, then I think it would be appropriate to consider the North Carolina Public Defense System's budget needs in the council's requests or comments, however you want to frame them. And I'm happy to work with Jennifer and Mary to get IDS's needs to the committee and to the council.
I think that would be wonderful. Thank you, Whitney. And would it be appropriate, Judge McGee and Judge Rader, to have Whitney and Jennifer and Mary Pollard submit maybe a proposed addendum to your report to add as soon as they can do that?
Certainly, and I'm sure that Judge Rader and I are happy to talk with all three. First to talk about a little bit how the process works, although Jennifer, you certainly know that very well, but just to make certain that they understand clearly that we're ready to have the information, we want to share it, and we want to promote it.
Excellent. Yeah, it seems like that's, although the entire system, the entire judicial branch has been chronically underfunded in North Carolina, that particular aspect has been underfunded even more than some. And this is a good time to focus on all of this. We're all looking at too small of a pot for too many needs. But all of the hands that want to be in the pot need to speak up so they can be included in the recommendations. And I appreciate your Whitney and Jennifer to reach out to Mary Pollard and Judge McGee, and I appreciate your being willing to work with them to come up with some something to add to the report on those recommendations.
And this is Jennifer again. I think we can do that probably within a week, 2 at the most. I mean, it's not going to take long.
That would be wonderful. At the end of this discussion, I had sort of a proposed timetable between now and the next meeting, which is supposed to be October 2nd, to sort of get things all put together so that we can hopefully have a report that we can approve in time to meet the budgetary process. But if y'all can get right on that within the next week or two, that would be perfect. So thank you.
Thank you, Justice Hudson. Thank you, Judge McGee. Thanks, Jennifer.
It appears that Director Wooten has chimed in. Did you have any comments you wanted to make, Director Wooten?
Good morning, everyone. The only thing that I'll add to Whitney's comments is more just a procedural comment, really, as the Judicial Council would send its recommendations to the chief. Typically, our budget team, we would sit down with the chief, of course, to put some priorities together as we go to the session. Typically, our process, and certainly one that I plan to follow this time when it comes to IDS's budget request, we typically don't prioritize them. What IDS sends us as their priorities, we typically tag those on to our budget requests and advocate for those just as we would ours. So I just wanted to kind of put that procedural piece out there that even when IDS would bring will bring its budget priorities to us, we typically, and would not this year, prioritize them the way that we would those things that come out of the AOC budget. But we typically take IDS's priorities, tag them onto ours, and advocate for those along with, the time that we advocate for ours. So that was just a procedural point I want to just throw out for the committee.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Well, may I ask the
Anybody?
question, then, do you think that we should use that method again because perhaps the General Assembly's gotten used to it, or should we include it, you think, in our overall request?
Well, I think it's, because the Judicial Council's, budget priorities will go to, to the chief. I don't think there's anything wrong with the council including IDS's information with us, but I will tell, but when it comes time to prioritize them, we typically would add them to ours and not go through and like we would our regular budget items, basically. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the committee adding IDS's information with what they submit to the chief.
Thank you.
It would seem to me like it couldn't hurt, like you said, Director Wooten, to have IDS's proposals and needs added to the budget and performance measures report, as well as in the AOC proposed budget. It seems like the more that they hear that their needs for IDS, then maybe they'll actually listen. So seems like I appreciate your. Excuse me?
We know the Chief Justice will.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So that's great. Thank you, Director Wooten. Did anybody else have any comments or questions for the budget and performance measures report? Whitney Fairbanks says thank you, Director. Any comments for Judge McGee, Judge Rader? Anything else from either of the committee co-chairs? Well, thank you all very much for your work on this, and I will look forward to further discussion later in the meeting, and then to seeing what is added on behalf of IDS and the public defender system. So thank you all for being willing to go forward with that.
Justice Hudson, before we move forward, may I take a moment of personal privilege and say that I am so pleased I've had the opportunity to work with Judge Rader. And the committee may well know that we've had the uncomfortable information of knowing that he will be retiring to the bench at the end of the month. And just wanted to remind everyone that he has served in that role for 26 years, and that 13 of those years has been as chief. That is an astounding role. And I wanted to say thank you for working together, not only on the council, but the fact that we worked together on the Celebrating Courts Committee for a number of years. It has been a pleasure, and I have been honored to work with you. I just wanted to be able to say that publicly because we don't always get that opportunity, and this seemed like far too good a one not to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge McGee and Judge Rader. We're all over the state and in Wake County for all your many contributions over the years to the judiciary and the district court and all over the entire court system. It makes you wonder again about the mandatory retirement age, which is a question that comes up from time to time. But you will be sorely missed. Thank you so much for your many contributions to the work of the council and the judiciary as a whole. And thank you for bringing that up, Judge McGee.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a labor of love. It's been wonderful.
Well, we will really miss you, and thank you so much for all that you've done. I hate to move on. It seems like we could talk about Judge Rader all day, but maybe we can do that another time, and specifically focused on honoring him and his work. And Judge McGee, you're not too far behind either, as I understand it.
4 months.
It's just, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it as well. But for now, I think we probably ought to move to the next committee report. And thank you all so much for the work that you've done pulling this together for the council. This is terrific work. Okay, so the next committee report that we have is from the Case Management Strategy Subcommittee. And this is a very comprehensive report. There's a lot of stuff in here, very concentrated. And the chair, Judge Joe Burns, has submitted this report. And so I would like to turn it over to Joe Burns to comment and or summarize the recommendations of the subcommittee. Are you here?
Thank you, Justice Hudson. The Case Management Committee held its third committee meeting July 14th via WebEx, of course. And the committee discussed possible recommendations to the council regarding requests submitted by advocates of model family court expansion, as well as proposed expansion of specialized recovery courts. The committee also considered the submissions of the 8 legal profession stakeholder groups concerning long and short-term needs as articulated in the midst of the pandemic. The committee members present, 4 of the 6 committee members were present, and we had also consulted with Judge Sermons by email, arrived at consensus recommendations to the council during that meeting and in email discussions after the meeting. And that draft, which you have up on the screen, represents our consensus recommendations, really our priorities, and not only the recommendations that we could agree on that we thought were not only priorities, but that were within the competence of our committee. And so we have those there. Hopefully the committee members have had it, council members have had a chance to review those as they were circulated prior to this meeting. And so you have our, I'm not going to read all of that obviously, but we focused first on sort of our original mandate to discuss model family court and recovery court expansion and issues, and then the requests from the 8 groups. And so you see those there, and for your consideration.
Thank you, Joe. Does anyone have comments or questions for Chairman Burns? There's a lot in here. It looks like a lot of it comes from the recommendations that were submitted at the last meeting from the stakeholder groups. And it looks like you've carefully broken it down into funding needs and other priorities, and condensed it into a really thorough report. I really appreciate this. It's very helpful. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Justice Hudson, this is Judge Rader.
Yes.
Just a question or maybe a comment. I noticed in the section on expansion of recovery courts, which I totally support. We have 2 adult recovery courts in Lake County I have been associated with for 20 years and preside over one regularly. Under section 2, number 2, that funding be requested for 5 new recovery court coordinator positions. I assume those are intended to be new courts, not existing courts. And the reason I ask is...
It's a good question.
The reason I ask is for years, when recovery courts first started in North Carolina, They were totally grant funded. And each district sort of created their own district by whatever funding they could get. Generally, it's federal funding. And then the state General Assembly stepped in and realized it was a good expenditure of funds, a good way to allocate funding. So all the recovery courts were funded by the state. And then in, I think, 2000, this lasted about 5 or 6 years. In 2011, they pulled the plug and took away all funding for recovery courts. So some disbanded, unfortunately. Some were picked up by local funding through ABC commissions or county funding, and some continue to exist on grant funding. Like we continue to exist in Wake on federal BJA money, SAMS grants, and some local ABC commission money with the support of the county. So it's kind of a blend. But it seems like we are moving toward a hybrid here where some will be state, if this occurs, some will be state funded through these positions. Some will be continue to be grant funded. So the only reason I raised the issue is keep in mind that there are existing recovery courts that if funding were to dry up, it's possible they could dissolve or disband, and that would be tragic. I would love to see the General Assembly fund all our recovery courts.
Yeah, yes, Judge Rader, thank you. We took that particular request from the request of the sort of the priority wish list that we asked for from the advocates for recovery court expansion. As far as exactly where that funding would come from or how those coordinators were assigned, again, we're not the budget committee, so we leave that up to people who understand that a little better than we do. And where they would be assigned, again, for myself anyway, and I think this reflects the feelings of the other members of the committee, we understand the problem with finding funding and that there is funding outside of the state from private groups, I guess, and grants. We would hope that there would be some state funding given to recovery courts at least. Of course, we would want the various stakeholder groups to continue to seek funding wherever they could get it. So how those positions would be assigned if they were created, I'm not sure if they would be made available to existing courts or places that wanted to adopt the recovery court model. But we thought that there seems to be a need for more than that, obviously, but we thought that particular wish list request was reasonable for the 5 positions.
So are those designed for, are geared at new recovery courts, or in response to what Judge Rader said?
We don't know, actually. We don't know enough about how they would be assigned if they were created and with what funding. I mean, perhaps Judge Sermons or other members of the committee might have a better idea about that. But from my point of view, just me personally, it could go either way. It could go wherever they were decided they were most needed.
Judge Sermons, you look like you might be wanting to chime in.
Yes, I did. Unfortunately, I was not able to meet with my subcommittee due to other court and other matters. And I quite frankly saw the 5 and didn't know where it came from, but that's only been in the last week. I believe that for a bellwether issue that this group is to recommend to the General Assembly on case management, managing an opioid addiction through the methods done in drug court are working. And I would like the group to eliminate number 2 and say, we request the state of North Carolina to fund recovery courts in the fullest capacity possible. So they don't have to keep on going to the private grant funding and the General Assembly on special bills and who can get their legislator to put in money in the budget at the last minute during the, process. And so that would have been my request and talk to Joe and John and Marcia and Hugh and the group, but I was unable to do so. And I would like to open that can of worms now, Justice Hudson. And I think it's crucial. I think it's important that we request it to be fully funded and then to let them do what they will. That's what they're going to do anyway. But
No, it's hard to disagree with that. One of the things that I was thinking about doing when we're finished with the committee reports today is talking about how to finalize it. And one possibility would be to put this, when we get a third committee report, to put the 3 committee reports together and include a cover memo or executive summary of the 3 committee reports and submit that whole package as a final report from the council. But in that summary, we could add that the overall position, if this is the consensus of the group, is to request that recovery courts be funded fully statewide to the extent possible. And also without taking out any of the specific recommendations in the committee report.
Well, I don't know that the 5 positions were really anything that was tied to this district's drug court or that district's drug court or this replacement of funding. Joe, you might help me with that, but irregardless of that, in order to move things along, I think a possible motion to do that for this report, as you just stated and as I just stated, would you entertain such a motion?
I'm assuming, let me see if I can restate what I think you're asking to move to do, is to perhaps ask the committee if they would agree to add into their report in the overall recommendation of Roman numeral 2, that in general, they request that recovery courts be funded statewide to the fullest extent possible.
Yes, and see, I don't really know the background, so Joe and Hugh and John, Marcia, y'all help us with this conversation about why only 5 rather than fund them all was selected.
Well, Judge Sermons, we initially took the figure, the request for 5 specifically from the list submitted by recovery court advocates. We had asked them to try and prioritize, their top requests. And they listed a request for 5 new recovery court coordinator positions.
Where were they?
And we thought that was, at the very least reasonable. I think it's a separate question whether we want to put in a general recommendation to fund courts as fully as possible. I think we were trying to do more specific priority requests based on what the advocates had asked for. And so I assumed that they had put in a budget request already, specifically asking for 5 new positions. I think it's obvious they would like to get as full funding as they could. We were simply trying to be specific based on the input that we had received, as we discussed in emails and then at the committee meeting and afterwards after the committee meeting. So that's where that came from. I think it's a different question if the committee wanted to meet and take a vote as to whether we should just ask for the fullest possible funding for any recovery court that any district wanted to set up.
Let me ask you this, Joe. Is your committee likely to meet again between now and our next full meeting in October?
I think that we can do that. Yes,
It seems like
we hadn't considered the next meeting. Just waiting until we had this meeting to see what, sort of what the idea would be moving forward.
I wonder if Judge Sermons and you would be satisfied with taking that possibility of adding an overall recommendation for fully funding recovery courts statewide into the report as a general. It's almost a given that we're recommending that with these specifics. I don't think the two are inconsistent.
No.
But would it be something that you'd be willing to take to the committee between now and October 2nd, whether it's a brief conference call or an actual WebEx meeting or something?
Yes.
Sermons, would that satisfy?
Sure. I'd kind of like to find out what everybody else thinks on this council, though. It seems to me not to be that much of a controversial thing that we can move right on. It's just a small part of this whole report.
Let me ask this of the council. Let me ask the council as a whole, does anyone disagree with that as an overall recommendation?
Well, I don't disagree, but I will note that on the budget and performance measures listing, unfortunately, that particular topic was listed under long-term needs. And it's the last one on the list. It says fund family and recovery courts for all districts that seek to adopt them. I believe that was perceived as a long-term goal, but I'm hearing now that perhaps it needs to be moved up the list substantially.
Well, Judge McGee, I would say that the courts that have their private funding and their grant fundings struggle every year to get those renewed. Our new drug court in my district has been funded, and it is a very limited time. And so while we're just getting started, we're also scared to death that it's going to end in 2 years or some figure like that. And I just think it's important enough to try to put it on a front burner rather than some long-term, even though it is a long-term needs. But I guess maybe the 5 is what kind of confuses me. I don't know what 5 they are, and I don't know, maybe we could do a hybrid that said the funding be provided for coordinators for drug courts, and specifically the needs of these are crucial. But then if you start singling them out, every drug court we have is going to say, I have needs. So,
Justice Hudson, I'm sorry, I don't know if you're monitoring the chat or not, and so forgive me for butting in, but I wondered if I might try and answer that question.
Yeah, no, that would be great. No, I wasn't monitoring the chat. I was listening to the conversation.
Yes, right. I believe the number 5 probably comes from the fact that the state legislature's most recent budget included funding for the first time, as Judge Rader noted, since 2011, funding for 5 new recovery courts. It did not specify that they needed to be drug recovery courts. In fact, I think one of them was intended to be a veterans treatment court, or veterans court rather. And those there were specific counties identified for those. Pitt County, Haywood County, and McKinley may have to help me here, Cumberland County, and there were 2 others. And I think part of the reasoning for our staff saying that 5 in a year is a reasonable goal is in part because any new courts have to receive, the whole court team has to receive the required training. And so we, as much as we'd love to have recovery courts in all 100 counties immediately, it just is by necessity, by the way that we have to get them up and going. only going to be possible to add a few a year to the existing recovery courts. And so I think if I'm hearing the conversation correctly, that both are needed. So both the statement that the long-term priority and goal, if that's the wish of the committee, is that the drug recovery courts statewide be a priority, and that for this intermediate or immediate need, 5 new court coordinator positions for the year. You may have other questions.
I think that's helpful. And I appreciate Judge McGee chiming in as well. And if your committee meets between now and October, perhaps that could be moved from or at least included in the short-term needs as well as the long-term needs for funding of recovery courts. I see that Jennifer Harjo also would like to comment. All right.
Actually, I was just concurring with Judge Sermons.
Oh, okay. Did anyone else want to comment about this discussion about the?
Judge Hudson, this is McKinley.
Yes.
I appear as the JEMMW1, so
okay.
That's what I said.
Well, chime in anytime, Mr. Director.
the only thing that I will add, I agree wholeheartedly what Anna said, that this is an area that I think it's important to put both, certainly in the recommendation. But as you all know, when it comes to putting a budget together to take to the General Assembly, some of the things that you have to really consider is what would look like sticker shock. So if I were to look at 58 courts that are in session right now and said, I want to replace the county funding, the federal funding, you can just imagine kind of what that price would look like. So I think the long-term goals certainly should be, funding recovery courts with state dollars everywhere that is postured and ready to open them and to operate them. But to Anna's point as well, we had some traction, with the General Assembly before to at least look at the expansion of 5. And so I think that's probably where that number came from. And I think that for us, it would be helpful for us to know that the Judicial Council supports the long-term plan of state funding for all courts statewide, as well as an immediate look at expanding the number of courts, at least to these 5 where that are postured and ready.
Thank you for that. And to the council as a whole, does anyone disagree with the director's suggestion about supporting both the overall goal and the shorter term, smaller ask? It seems to make a lot of sense. Not hearing any.
Judge Summers, I'm fine with that. And I think that philosophy of Judge McGee, the director, and Anna Stearns is obvious that we can't ask for everything at once, but I did not know where the 5 was coming from, but if it's just, we'll never get more than 5 in any one year. So why don't we just ask for 5? Then I'm on board with that strategy as well. I just want to make sure that we all know that they work and we need them.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And it's really important to remember that, because as Judge Rader brought up the the other sources of funding, grants on a year-by-year basis is not a long-term survival strategy. When you're having to go back to grant funders year after year, it just takes a lot of time and effort, and it's just too sort of destabilizing to have to live that way. So the more it can be part of the state budget, it seems like the more stable it's likely to be for the long term. And there is a huge need out there. I think we all know that.
Justice Hudson. This is Marcia. Can I make a comment, please?
Yes, please do, Marcia.
We have the very first Veterans Treatment Court in North Carolina. We've operated for 7 years. And we initially, the only position that we had was a recovery court coordinator position that was funded by the Governor's Crime Commission. And we eventually got a BJA grant and a SAMHSA grant, and that's what we've been operating off of and doing very well, I will say. But we lost our SAMHSA grant this year, and we have 3 more months of funding through BJA. So we are looking to get another BJA grant. But in the event that we didn't, and you're from a county that does not have the means to support the court to the extent that we're operating now, we could very well, like the judge said, be closed down. And that would be very, very bad thing because we are so successful. So when we say we want 5 new recovery court coordinator positions, we all want new courts, but we want to be very cognizant of the fact that someone has a court that is doing very well, lose that funding and have to possibly close because we don't have anyone else to pick us up. We might could get some small assistance, but nothing to the point that what we have now. So I hope that there would always be some provision. A county like ours would be able to get funding in the event it came down to close or just have that one position.
That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Anything else? That's Judge Rader?
Yes, just 2 things. One, to echo Marcia's point, I think it's a very, very good point because I've been involved in the startup of one before. It takes a tremendous amount of work to get one of these courts up and running and everyone trained and on board. So I think the last thing we would want is to lose an existing court that is successful. The other thing and reason why I agree with Judge Sermons 100% is I think, although I understand that budget's limited, and I think Director Wooten is exactly right, that we're not going to get a pot of money to fund them all, but I think that needs to be the goal. And I think we need to make it clear that that is the goal, that these ought to be state funded. And when you think back to the 60s when the unified court system was created, one of the reasons was because we had this hodgepodge of local courts. And recovery court is a classic example of where suddenly it's not funded by the state, it's many times being funded locally. So it becomes a local program, and then the wealthier counties who have the funds to do that, they are able to provide more services and more justice than other courts. And that is what I think the whole unified court system wanted to get away from. So, the idea of having some recovery court or treatment court coordinators, grant or nonprofit employees, and some county employees, and some judicial branch employees is a direction we probably need to be moving away from and moving toward having all of them judicial branch employees. So that's just something I want to add.
Thank you for that. That's a really important point to tie it back to the goal of the unified court system in the first place. And I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Chairman Burns about the case management strategies subcommittee report? Not hearing any. I think we can then move to the third committee. Whitney, I know you had some other things come up, but and so we don't have a written report, but can you, do you have a report from the committee that you can give us just verbally?
Justice, can you hear me?
I can. There's a little bit of an echo.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm still working to resolve technology. There's no other sword to fall on but my own here. No, the committee does not have a report, and that is entirely on my shoulders. We are working to schedule a meeting as early as possible and looking at dates as soon as next week so that we can meet and pull together a report and recommendations for the justice within the next couple of weeks, Chief Justice, within the next couple of weeks. And again, I bear full responsibility for this. I didn't anticipate being double bunked at IDS for 5 months. I thought it would be more like 2. And I also didn't anticipate the public health crisis. And so quite a few things got away from me, and this is one that did. And I apologize for my delinquency.
No. I think we've all had challenges to one degree or another. And I'm just very grateful that people have been able to continue doing this work to the extent that they have. And because there are just so many challenges on so many levels that we all have every day. So don't beat yourself up about that, Whitney. But we do appreciate your
Can I have a
willing
comment? This is Judge.
Of course.
For all of you that I guess maybe not, I guess maybe all of you don't know, the Conference of Superior Court Judges, I'm president of, appointed a racial equity group in early July of Superior Court judges and other court administrators, some from AOC, some from the School of Government, to come up with a training platform and progress for the Superior Court bench. And our first racial justice equity training is next Friday. Of course, it is a Zoom being hosted by the School of Government, but it seeks to bring forth a administration of justice in a manner which everyone recognizes those type of implicit biases that may exist without any knowledge to any judicial officer. And so we're going to have that next Friday. We have another one in September, and we're going to have a third one with probably a national speaker in October. Now, unfortunately, these things are kind of limited to the Superior Court bench, but I'm sure that would be helpful to all of y'all, and I may just go ahead and send you invitations for it just because you are the Judicial Council of the state, and I think it's important. But we're only doing that because we felt an obligation to make sure that our house was in order as far as concentrating on such an important issue in this day and time. So while Whitney may not have had the time to do a whole lot, there is something that's going on from the administration of justice standpoint in regards to that issue. So we're glad we're doing it. Carla Archie and Bob Irving, Superior Court judges, have been the chairs of that, and they've worked hard to get us to that point. And so that is going on.
Thank you. That's really good to know. And I know that members of the council would appreciate it if you think it's appropriate to send invitations. It sounds like very valuable work that certainly bears on the administration of justice fairly and across the state. Thanks for letting us know about that. Whitney, did you have anything to comment about that or anything further?
No, I don't necessarily have any comments on what Judge Sermons has said. I knew that the conference was taking steps to educate and address the issue, and as part of the North Carolina public defender system, the part of the system that has long understood the disproportionate impact on people of color and low wealth in our criminal justice system. We are really gladdened to see that. And I do want to be clear that while I may have failed as the committee chair, that IDS and the public defenders have continued to work very hard to address these issues across the state. In fact, beginning July 1, IDS has a new contract for early representation in first appearances in Alamance County, which provides folks who have not been able to make the bond set by the magistrate counsel at first appearances, and also provides the counsel, these attorneys, access to the detainees in advance of their first appearances so that they can gather information that will be useful in arguing for a more reasonable condition of pretrial release. So
we are working across the state to address these issues and are always happy to partner with any of the stakeholder groups who also are focused on them. And so that being said, my report to the the council, too many commissions and councils, would be that I'm working to get this committee together, hopefully next week, and then we will submit a draft report via email to council members, and perhaps we will have to discuss it in the virtual realm rather than the semi-virtual realm. But we are going to work very hard to get recommendations to the council and Chief Justice sooner rather than later.
That's great. Let me add a couple things. I think just about meetings being virtual. It looks to me like for the foreseeable future this fall anyway, that meetings are going to continue to be either by Zoom or WebEx or on the phone as opposed to in person. I know the court, we had conference on Wednesday and agreed to send out calendars indicating that our next set of oral arguments, which is August 31 and September 1st and 2nd, will again be by WebEx like it was in June, and that the default will be for our next set of arguments in October, that it will be that way again, unless something dramatic changes and people will be notified otherwise. But that seems like a reasonable assumption going into the fall, that we're still going to be operating by remote and video, and it does present its challenges. But, you know, I've been surprised at how remarkably productive and efficient various aspects of the court system have been under the circumstances. And I think it's kind of made a lot of people become comfortable with technology that they might have been resistant to before. And it seems to be working pretty well, given that there are glitches here and there. But so that's kind of just on the practical, how it looks like meetings are going to look. I did want to talk a little bit about the timeline going forward. What it seems like that Whitney's committee is going to work to have a meeting of some sort and come up with a report that we can add to the compilation of recommendations from the council as a whole. And I'm thinking that our next meeting of the full council is scheduled to be Friday, October 2nd. That if we could have all of the committees meet again if they need to in whatever means they deem appropriate, and submit any amended reports or reports for the council members to review by 2 weeks before that meeting. So I think that would be Friday, the 20, let's see, not 22nd. Friday, the 18th of September. Then we would have 2 weeks for the members of the council to look at them, and for the committee chairs and I and staff to attempt to propose an executive summary put together in a package that the council could review at the meeting and hopefully approve on October 2nd. Does that sound like a reasonable timeline? I just kind of came up with that. And I'm, you know, so any thoughts or modifications are welcome at this point. You all think that would work as a timeline? And also, does anyone object to the committees going forward on the basis of discussion that we've had today to either amend and add to their reports or about the funding of the recovery courts overall, and make that part of the report of the two committees that we've heard from? I think it would be appropriate to know that the members of the council in general are supportive of the committees moving forward toward finalizing the recommendations and the reports that have been submitted, so that we can have a report to look at the next one. Does anyone object to that process moving forward?
No.
Okay, well, that's great. So in that, anybody else have a comment or thought about that?
Can I make a comment about something else just quickly?
Sure.
I wanted to let you know that although we don't say much about the magistrates in our recommendation, I'm pleased to say that the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism has been working over the past year with the magistrates to do two things. One, try to encourage them to be more quote unquote organized, and also to develop a code of conduct. The code of conduct has been developed, is now being shared with the magistrates across the state, I understand, and hopefully will be able to be approved at some point in time in the future. That was a long time project that there was some concern about whether or not it could actually occur, but it has, and I think it's to the credit of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. As soon as I know it's available, generally, I'll be more than happy to share it with the members of our council for you to be able to see the kind of things that can be done when people really want to move things forward, even though they had some reluctance to begin with. Also want to mention to you, in talking about administration of justice, that Justice Hudson, you remember a little over a year ago, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals had a program on basically workplace harassment and inherent bias. So yes, it was nice that we were a little bit ahead of the curve, perhaps, but we shared that information with AOC because they, of course, assisted us very greatly in being able to put on the program. And it is something that's available, you know, if there's the need to be able to replicate it across the state. The State Bar's CLE board that I serve on is also proposing potential recommended training on inherent bias, diversity, and racism. That will be presented hopefully maybe in October or so to the State Bar Council. And I hope that you will keep an eye out for that and be supportive if you think that's something that would benefit the lawyers across the state. It is a time that we don't want to lose, and we think now is the best opportunity we might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Anybody have any comments or questions about that for Judge McGee? No, I know that our meeting is scheduled to go until noon. There's no requirement that we go all the way until noon if we have wrapped up our discussion. But I did want to just sort of open it in case anyone has any other aspects of the committee reports or the process to talk about at this point, and once we're sure we're done with that discussion for now, to see if anybody has any other items to bring up. Director Wooten, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, Madam Chair, I do not.
Okay. just checking.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may, just on behalf of the Chief Justice, to all of our court system personnel who are on the call today, thank you so much for everything that you are doing. We know that this is such a stressful and worrying time. Most of you have had to face at least temporary courthouse closures or cancellations of sessions of court as a result of COVID exposures in your courthouses. And we just thank you so very much for continuing to serve the public with such dedication and purpose, and for taking the additional time to be here today for these thoughtful discussions to make sure that we are continuing to improve justice for all North Carolinians. And just our hearts and prayers are with you every day, and I hope that you are all staying very safe. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna, so much for that. And as I said at the outset of the meeting, I'm so grateful that all the members of the council have continued to do such committed work on behalf of this group, in addition to everything else that's going on. It's really unprecedented times, and we've all got new challenges every single day. And so I also am very grateful to everyone.
Justice Hudson?
Yes, sir.
If you would just mention again, I didn't note it down, I'm sorry, your hopes for when we would submit sort of a final or modified report prior to the October 2nd meeting.
I was just about to do exactly that.
Okay, great.
Thank you for asking. What I would hope and request of the committees, the three committees, is that between now and September 18th, which is a Friday, that the committees could have whatever form of additional meeting or conferring that you need to do about your reports to amend or update them, and that mostly final reports will be submitted to the council by September 18th. So we have 2 weeks to look at those, and hopefully I was hopeful that I could draft the committee chairs, Judge McGee and Joe and Whitney, to help be a sort of editing committee that we could meet on the telephone or something and do a draft with perhaps some help from our Cracker Jack staff of an executive summary to pull these reports together, and so it'll be ready for final approval. But the date that we're looking at to have everything submitted from the committees is September 18th, and that would give the committee chairs and me and staff 2 weeks to put together a cover memo, executive summary, whatever you want to call it, that we could look at our next meeting, October 2nd. Does that timeline suit you, Joe?
Justice Hudson, I just want to mention I'm actually going to be out on short-term disability as of September 9th when I'm having some surgery. I was going to address this to my committee members to see if someone could sort of serve as chair while I am out. So I may not be able to be involved after that date for an indefinite period of time, and may miss the October 2nd meeting. So I will certainly try and get this final report together and in prior to that. But as far as working on the summary, I may have to ask one of our other committee members to help with that.
If you can do that and have someone who can act on your behalf as chair in your absence, that would be great. And I'm sure I speak for the rest of the council when saying that I really appreciate all the work that you've done for this committee so far, and certainly wish you well with your medical challenges coming up. I hope you'll keep us posted, and we look forward to receiving your materials before you take off, and we really do wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns about that timeline? I think that with that, all of that, those details apparently being more or less acceptable to work with, I don't have anything further about the committee, the council recommendations at this point until we get those final reports in. But if anybody has any additional business or suggestions for the council, this would be a good time to bring that up. Is there any new business anyone wants to discuss at this point? Well, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn with great thanks from me for the work of all of you.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Do we need a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn, Sean?
No, I think Judge Rader did it.
Okay. Thank you all very much, and stay well, stay safe, and thanks for all of the work you're doing on behalf of the judiciary and the people of North Carolina. Take care, be well. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judge Rader.
Take care.
Have a good weekend.
Y'all too.